Commander Park Hyun-woo stood at the window of his ship, watching the massive space station grow larger as they approached. Harmony's edge was huge, bigger than any city on Earth. It floated in space like a metal planet, covered in lights that blinked in patterns he could not understand. This was where the most powerful beings in the galaxy met to decide the fate of entire worlds. Park had been to many planets, fought in many battles, but he had never felt this nervous. Today was different. Today the Council would decide what happened to humanity. His ship docked with a soft bump. Park walked down the metal hallway, his boots making small sounds on the floor. Other beings walked past him, some tall and thin, like walking trees, others short and covered in fur. All of them looked at him with eyes that seemed to glow. They knew he was human, and they all seemed to think the same thing. Humans were trouble. The council chamber was a huge round room with seats that went up in circles, like a giant bowl turned upside down. In the center sat the most important chair, where the Supreme Chancellor ruled over all the others. Park had seen pictures of Velthak the Eternal, but seeing him in person was different. The alien was old, so old that his skin looked like old leather, and his eyes held the wisdom of thousands of years. Dr. Kim So-young was already there, sitting in the small section marked for Earth representatives. She was one of the smartest people Park knew, someone who understood both humans and aliens better than anyone else. When she saw Park, she gave him a small nod. Her face was serious, worried. The council will now hear the matter of the human problem. Velthak's voice filled the room. It was deep and strange, like rocks falling down a mountain. A tall blue alien stood up. This was Ralvoth the judge, the one who enforced the council's rules across the galaxy. Supreme Chancellor, honored members, we are here because humanity has become a danger to galactic peace. Park felt his hands turn into fists, but he stayed quiet. Dr. Kim had told him many times, let them speak first, then we respond. Ralvoth waved his hand, and the air in the center of the room began to glow. Images appeared, floating like ghosts, made of light. The first image showed a burning building on a human colony world. Park watched as a woman ran into the flames, not away from them. She came out carrying a small child. Look at this madness, Ralvoth said. A rational being runs from fire, but humans run into it. Why? For their cubs, their children. More images appeared. Human soldiers throwing themselves at enemy weapons to protect civilians, parents refusing to leave dangerous areas when their children were missing. Colony ships turning back into meteor storms to rescue other ships with families aboard. Every species in this galaxy understands the basic rule of survival. Ralvoth continued. The individual must survive so the species can continue. But humans break this rule again and again. They die for their cubs without thinking. An alien that looked like a giant insect clicked its mouthparts. It is not natural. It is dangerous thinking that spreads to other species. Park wanted to shout at them, to tell them they were wrong. But he remembered his own daughter back, on Earth, how he would do anything to keep her safe. Maybe the aliens were right about one thing. Humans were different. Velthak looked down at the human section. Dr. Kim So-young, you speak for Earth. What do you say to these charges? Dr. Kim stood up slowly. She was small compared to most of the aliens in the room, but when she spoke, her voice was strong. Honored Chancellor, what you call madness, we call love. Yes, we protect our children even when it is dangerous. Yes, we take risks that other species would not take. But this has made us strong, not weak. Strong? Ralvoth's voice was full of disbelief. Your colonies are always asking for help. Your ships need rescue more than any others. How is this strength? We ask for help because we try things others won't try, Dr. Kim replied. We go to dangerous places because we believe our children deserve new worlds to live on. We take risks because some things are worth more than safety. The room was quiet for a long moment, then Velthak spoke again. The Council has made its decision. Humanity must recall all colonies from the Outer Rim territories. You must submit to population controls to limit your expansion. You have 30 standard days to comply. Park's heart stopped. Recall the colonies? There were millions of humans living on dozens of worlds, people who had spent their whole lives building new homes among the stars. And if we refuse? Dr. Kim asked, though Park could see she already knew the answer. Complete quarantine, Belthak said simply. No trade with any galactic species, no technology sharing, no protection from the hostile forces that exist in the dark spaces between worlds. Humanity will be alone. Dr. Kim sat down hard, as if the words had hit her like a physical blow. Park felt the same way. Earth's technology came from trading with alien worlds. Their defense systems, their faster-than-light travel, their medical advances, all of it depended on staying connected to galactic civilization. But the alternative was worse. Give up the colonies meant abandoning millions of people. Submit to population controls meant letting aliens decide how many human children could be born. You have 30 days, Ralvoth repeated. Choose wisely. The session ended, and the aliens began to leave. Park watched them go, these ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy for longer than humans had existed. They were powerful, wise, and completely certain they were right. Dr. Kim walked over to Park, her face pale. We need to get back to Earth immediately, she said. The president needs to know. They walked through the station in silence. Around them, alien traders and diplomats went about their business. But Park noticed how they looked at the humans. Now, before there had been curiosity, maybe some fear. Now there was something else. Pity. Like they were looking at people who were already dead. On the ship ride back to Earth, Park stood at the same window, watching the stars go by. Each point of light might be a sun with planets around it. Planets where humans had built homes, schools, farms. Places where children played games and parents told bedtime stories. What are we going to do? He asked Dr. Kim. She was quiet for a long time before answering. I don't know. The Council sees our love for our children as weakness, as something that makes us dangerous, but how can we change who we are? How can we stop being human? Park thought about his daughter again, how she laughed when he came home from long trips, how she hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. Would he risk his life for her? Of course, would he risk the whole human race? The question made his head hurt. Maybe, Dr. Kim said quietly. The real question is not whether we should change, but whether we can make them understand why we won't. The ship flew on through the darkness, carrying them back to Earth with news that would change everything. Behind them, the lights of Harmony's Edge grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. In 30 days, humanity would have to choose between safety and freedom, between survival and staying true to what made them human. It was a choice no species should have to make. But as Park looked out at the stars, he knew that somewhere out there, human parents were tucking their children into bed, telling them stories about brave explorers and distant worlds. They had no idea that their whole way of life was about to end. The countdown had begun. The emergency meeting room in the Earth Government building was full of worried faces. President Lee Min-ho sat at the head of the long table, looking older than he had just a week ago. The news from the Galactic Council had hit everyone hard. Admiral Choi Jin-young slammed her hand on the table. This is insane. They want us to abandon our own people. Millions of families who trusted us to protect them. We don't have a choice, said Finance Minister Kang Woo-jin. Without galactic trade, our economy will collapse. Our technology will fall behind. We'll be alone in a dangerous universe. Dr. Kim So-young had been quiet since returning from Harmony's Edge. Now she spoke up. There has to be another way. Some compromise we can make. What compromise? Admiral Choi asked. They made it clear. Recall everyone or face total isolation. There's no middle ground. President Lee rubbed his tired eyes. How many people are we talking about in all the colonies? 12,400,000, replied Colonial Affairs Secretary Park Soo-jin, spread across 43 worlds. Some colonies have been there for 3 generations. These aren't just outposts. They're home to these people. And the children? Dr. Kim asked quietly. Nearly 3 million under the age of 18, Park Soo-jin answered. Many of them have never seen Earth. The Outer Rim colonies are all they've ever known. The room fell silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing. How do you tell 3 million children they have to leave the only home they've ever known? Admiral Choi stood up and walked to the big window that looked out over the city. I say we fight. Our fleet isn't weak. We've got good ships, trained crews. Against the entire Galactic Council? President Lee shook his head. They have thousands of worlds, millions of ships. We'd be destroyed in days. Maybe, Admiral Choi said. But at least we'd die as free humans, not as prisoners in our own solar system. Meanwhile, far away on the colony world of New Busan, Captain Yoon Jae-min was facing his own impossible situation. He stood in the survey station, looking at the data his team had collected from deep underground. What they had found made no sense. Show me again, he said to engineer Han Mi-kyung. She pulled up the scan results on the main screen. Look at this. These structures go down for kilometers. They're not natural rock formations. Someone built them, but the materials are older than anything we've seen before. Geologist Park Yoon-hai leaned over the datapad. The dating system says these structures are millions of years old. That's impossible. No known species has been around that long. Maybe we're the first to find them, Captain Yoon said. Maybe that's why this planet seems so perfect for a colony. Before anyone could answer, the communication system beeped with an emergency message. Captain Yoon's face went white as he read it. What is it? Han Mi-kyung asked. New orders from Mir Earth Command. All Outer Rim colonies are to prepare for immediate evacuation. We have 28 days. The team stared at him in shock. Park Yoon-hai spoke first. Evacuate? Why? What's happening? Captain Yoon quickly explained what he knew about the Galactic Council's ultimatum. When he finished, the room was completely quiet. They can't be serious, Han Mi-kyung said finally. This is our home. My kids were born here. My husband's buried here. The evacuation ships can carry about 5,000 people each. Captain, Yoon continued reading the message. We'll need multiple trips to get everyone off the planet. How many people live in New Busan Colony now? Park Yoon-hai asked. Captain Yoon checked his population records. 22,400 people, including 6,000 children. Han Mi-kyung did the math quickly. The ships can't take everyone at once. Someone has to stay behind and wait for the second trip. The children go first, Captain Yoon said immediately. That's standard evacuation procedure. No. Everyone turned to look at Han Mi-kyung. Her face was set like stone. No? Captain Yoon asked. I won't leave my children behind, not even for a few days. And no other parent here will either, you know that? Park Yoon-hai nodded. She's right. The parents will never agree to split up from their kids. Captain Yoon felt a headache starting. He had been a soldier for 15 years, had followed orders in battles across 3 star systems, but this was different. These weren't soldiers. They were families. Then what do you suggest? He asked. We don't evacuate, Han Mi-kyung said, simply. We stay and fight for our home. Fight with what? We're a mining colony, not a military base. We're human, Han Mi-kyung replied. That has to count for something. Back on Earth, the emergency meeting was still going on. They had been talking for hours and no one had come up with a good answer. What if we evacuate just the Outer Rim colonies, suggested Dr. Kim. Keep the inner ones that are more established. The council was specific, President Lee said. All expansion into the Outer Rim must stop. That includes colonies we've already built. This is about more than just territory, Admiral Choi said. They're afraid of us, of what we represent. What do you mean? Asked Park Soo-jin. Think about it. Every other species in the galaxy puts individual survival first, but we put our children first, our families first. That scares them because it makes us unpredictable. Dr. Kim nodded slowly. The council likes order, control. They've been running things the same way for thousands of years. Then humans show up and break all their rules. So what's the real choice here? President Lee asked. Give up who we are. Or give up our place in the galaxy? The room was quiet again. Everyone knew that both choices led to the same place, the end of humanity as they knew it. Finance Minister Kang spoke up. Maybe we should take a vote, ask the colonies what they want to do. Ask them to choose between safety and freedom? Admiral Choi shook her head. That's not fair to them. Life isn't fair, President Lee said sadly. But maybe they have a right to decide for themselves. Dr. Kim pulled out her communication device. I'll send a message to all colony administrators, explain the situation and ask for their input. As she started typing, everyone in the room knew they were about to ask millions of people to make an impossible choice. Stay and risk everything, or run and lose everything that mattered. On New Busan, Captain Yoon received Dr. Kim's message. An hour later, he called a colony-wide meeting in the main community center. People packed in so tight that many had to stand outside and listen through the speakers. Captain Yoon explained everything, the Council's ultimatum, Earth's dilemma, and the evacuation order. When he finished, the crowd was completely silent. Then, a voice called out from the back. What do the children think? It was old Mr. Bay, who had been on New Busan since the first settlement. He had great-grandchildren playing in the colony's school. The children? Captain Yoon asked. You keep talking about what's best for the children, what the adults decide, but they're old enough to understand. Maybe they should have a say too. A teenage girl stood up in the crowd. It was Nam Yoo-jin, one of the brightest students in the colony school. Mr. Bay is right. This is our home too. We should get to choose. More young voices joined in. Soon half the crowd was under 20 years old, and they were all saying the same thing. They wanted to stay. Captain Yoon looked out at all the faces. Parents holding babies, teenagers standing with their friends, grandparents who had traveled across the galaxy to build new lives. They all looked scared, but they also looked determined. All right, he said finally. Let's vote. All in favor of evacuation, raise your hands. A few hands went up, maybe 50 out of the thousands of people there. All in favor of staying and fighting for our home? The rest of the crowd raised their hands, including most of the children. Captain Yoon sent his answer back to Earth that night. New Busan colony voted to stay. So did 37 other colonies. Only 6 chose evacuation. The countdown continued. 27 days left. Dr. Kim So-young had not slept in 3 days. Her office was covered with data screens, ancient files, and half-empty coffee cups. She was looking for something that might not even exist. A way to save humanity without giving up everything that made them human. The Galactic Council's archives were huge, containing millions of years of history from across the galaxy. Most of it was boring. Trade agreements, resource surveys, population reports. But buried deep in the oldest files, Dr. Kim was finding strange stories. She pulled up another file, this one marked with security warnings. It was about a species, called the Forgotten Ones. The Council had wiped them out so long ago that most people didn't even know they had existed. Interesting, Dr. Kim said to herself as she read. The Forgotten Ones had acted just like humans. They protected their young even when it was dangerous. They took risks other species wouldn't take. And the Council had decided they were too dangerous to live. Dr. Kim kept reading. The report said the Forgotten Ones had pathological disregard for individual survival in favor of genetic continuity. In simple words, they cared more about their children than themselves. That sounded very familiar. She dug deeper into the files, using her high-level security access to open documents that most people would never see. What she found made her hands shake. The Council hadn't just killed the Forgotten Ones. They had hunted them across the entire galaxy, destroying every trace of their civilization. It had taken hundreds of years, but they had wiped out billions of beings whose only crime was loving their children too much. But there was something else in the files, something that made Dr. Kim's heart race. The Forgotten Ones had left behind a message hidden in the quantum structure of their last outpost. The Council knew about it but couldn't decode it. Dr. Kim copied the message data and ran it through Earth's newest translation computers. It took hours, but finally, words appeared on her screen. The Devourers come from the void. Only those who choose their cubs over themselves can stand against the endless hunger. We die so that others might remember. Safety is not survival. Dr. Kim stared at the message. Who were the devourers? She searched through more files but found almost nothing. Just a few references to the ancient threat and the hunger from beyond the galaxy. Meanwhile, on New Busan, Captain Yoon's team was making their own discoveries. They had been working around the clock to understand the strange structures beneath their colony. This is incredible, Park Yun-hai said, looking at the latest scan results. The structures aren't just old, they're a machine, a massive machine that covers the entire planet. Engineer Han Mi-kyung looked up from her workstation. A machine that does what? I'm not sure yet. But look at these energy patterns. The whole thing is designed to broadcast some kind of signal into space. Captain Yoon studied the data. Like a communication system? More like a warning system, Park Yun-hai said. And I think it's still active. These readings show low-level power throughout the entire structure. Han Mi-kyung found something else strange. The access panels down there, they're designed for beings about our size. Not the tall aliens on the council, not the short furry ones. Beings like us. That's impossible, Captain Yoon said. Humans have only been in space for a few hundred years. Then maybe humans aren't the first species to be like us, Park Yun-hai suggested. They decided to go deeper into the structures. Captain Yoon led a small team down through the mining tunnels to where the ancient technology waited. The walls were covered in patterns that seemed to shift and move in the light from their flashlights. As they walked deeper, Han Mi-kyung's scanner started beeping faster and faster. Captain, you need to see this. The structures are responding to us being here. Lights began to flicker on along the walls, lights that had been dark for millions of years. The patterns on the walls started to glow, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. How is this possible? Captain Yoon whispered. They reached a huge chamber deep underground. In the center was a pillar covered in symbols, and floating above it was a hologram of the galaxy. But this wasn't the galaxy as it was now. This was how it had been long ago, with different stars and planets marked in bright colors. Park Yun-hai walked slowly around the pillar. Captain, I think these symbols are trying to tell us something. Look at this pattern here. It shows up over and over again. She pointed to a symbol that looked like two small circles protected by a larger circle around them. Parents and children, she said quietly. Captain Yoon felt a chill run down his spine. The Forgotten Ones. This was their technology. As if responding to his words, the hologram changed. Now it showed the galaxy as it was today, but there were new markers appearing at the edge. Red dots moving slowly toward the center, toward all the worlds where people lived. What are those? Han Mi-kyung asked. Before anyone could answer, the hologram zoomed in on one of the red dots. What they saw made them all take a step back. It was a ship, but not like any ship they had ever seen. It was huge, bigger than entire cities, and its surface seemed to eat light instead of reflecting it. More holograms appeared, showing hundreds of these dark ships moving through space, leaving nothing but empty systems behind them. Back on Earth, Dr. Kim's research was leading her to the same terrible conclusion. The Devourers were real, and they were coming. She found references buried in the oldest council records, stories that the leadership probably thought were just myths. Long ago, something had come from the dark space between galaxies. It consumed everything. Planets, stars, entire civilizations. The survivors called them the Devourers because that's all they did, devour. But how did anyone survive to tell the story? Dr. Kim found the answer in a file that made her blood run cold. The only species that had successfully fought against the Devourers were ones like humans and the Forgotten Ones. Species that put their children first, that were willing to die for others. These species could power the ancient defense systems that the Forgotten Ones had built throughout the galaxy. Dr. Kim immediately sent a message to Captain Yoon on New Busan. When she told him what she had found, everything started to make sense. The planet you're on, Dr. Kim said over the video link. It's not just a colony world. It's one of the defense installations the Forgotten Ones built. That's why the structures responded to you. You're genetically similar to them, Captain. Yoon looked around the ancient chamber where his team was still working. So we're like them? The species the Council wiped out? In the most important way, yes. You both put your children's safety above your own. That's what the Council is really afraid of. Not that you're dangerous, but that you're the key to fighting something even they can't handle. Han Mi-kyung looked up from her scanner. Dr. Kim, the defense system here is trying to activate. It's been sending signals since we arrived, but the power levels are too low. What kind of signals? Warning signals, broadcasting into deep space, trying to alert other installations. Park Yun-hai had been studying the holographic display. Dr. Kim, according to this star map, there should be dozens of these installations across the galaxy, but most of them are dark. Dr. Kim felt her heart sink. Because there's no one to activate them. The Council wiped out the Forgotten Ones, and now the Devourers are coming back, but the galaxy's defenses are dead. Not all of them, Captain, Yoon said firmly. This one is waking up. And if there are humans on other worlds with similar installations, we might be able to activate enough of them to make a difference, Dr. Kim finished. But there was a problem. The Galactic Council's ultimatum was still in effect. In 24 days, humanity would either evacuate their colonies or face total isolation, and the colonies were exactly where they needed to be to activate the ancient defenses. Dr. Kim made a decision that would change everything. She started copying all the information she had found, the files about the Forgotten Ones, the evidence of the coming Devourers, the location of the defense installations. She was going to tell the entire galaxy what the Council had been hiding, even if it meant the end of her career, even if it meant war with the most powerful government in known space. On New Busan, the ancient machinery was growing brighter. The hologram showed the Devourers getting closer to the edge of the galaxy. Captain Yoon and his team worked frantically to understand the controls, to figure out how to power up the planet's defenses. How much time do we have? Han Mi-kyung asked. Park Yun-hae checked the holographic display. If these readings are right, the first Devourer ships will reach the outer rim in about 6 months. 6 months, Captain Yoon repeated. To convince the Council to evacuate or defend the colonies, to activate a network of weapons that have been sleeping for millions of years. He looked around at his small team, then up at the ancient chamber that hummed with awakening power. Somewhere above them, his colonists were going about their daily lives, unaware that the fate of the galaxy might depend on their choice to stay and fight. The countdown to the Council's ultimatum continued. But now there was a bigger countdown, running alongside it. The countdown to the return of the Devourers and humanity's last chance to prove that love was stronger than fear. The alien fleet appeared in New Busan's sky like a storm made of metal and light. 12 massive warships, each one bigger than the entire human colony, hung in space above the planet. Their dark hulls blocked out the stars, casting shadows across the ground where families looked up in fear. On the flagship, Council Enforcer Ralvoth the Judge stood on the command deck, looking down at the human settlement through the ship's viewing screen. Such a small place, he thought. All this trouble, over such a tiny colony. Open communication channels, he ordered. Let's end this quickly. Down in the ancient chamber beneath New Busan, Captain Yoon Jaemin felt the entire planet shake as the alien ships powered up their weapons. The holographic displays around him were flashing with warning signals, showing energy readings that made his stomach drop. They're not here to negotiate, Engineer Han Mi-kyung said, watching her scanner. Those are weapons powered for planetary bombardment. Geologist Park Yun-hae looked up from the ancient control panel she had been studying. The defense system is trying to activate, but it needs more power. Much more power. Captain Yoon touched his communication device. This is Captain Yoon to all colonists. Everyone needs to get to the emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. But as people ran for safety above ground, Captain Yoon made a different choice. Instead of heading for the shelters, he walked deeper into the ancient chamber. Han Mi-kyung and Park Yun-hae followed him. Captain, what are you doing? Han Mi-kyung asked. Getting answers, Captain Yoon replied. He walked up to the central control pillar and placed his hands on the glowing symbols. If this machine was built by people like us, then maybe it will respond to us. The moment his skin touched the ancient metal, everything changed. Light exploded through the chamber, and suddenly Captain Yoon could see things that weren't there before. He saw the galaxy as the Forgotten Ones had seen it, full of species that loved their children and protected their families. He saw the Devourers too, massive dark ships that consumed everything in their path. But he also saw how the Forgotten Ones had fought back, using machines like this one, powered not by energy but by choice, the choice to stand and fight for others, even when it meant certain death. Captain, Park Yun-hai shouted, the defense system is responding to you. Above ground, Ralvoth's voice boomed across the colony through powerful speakers. Humans of New Busan, this is Council Enforcer Ralvoth. You have violated the evacuation order. You have 1 hour to surrender and prepare for transport, or this planet will be sterilized. In the colony's main square, people huddled together in small groups. Parents held their children close, trying to comfort them even though they were just as scared. Some people wanted to surrender to beg the aliens for mercy. Others wanted to fight even though they had no weapons that could hurt the massive ships above. That's when the children started speaking up. 16-year-old Nam Yu-jin stepped forward from where she had been standing with her parents. Mr. Ralvoth, she said, her young voice somehow carrying clearly through the communication system. This is our home. We're not leaving. More children joined her. Some were teenagers like Yu-jin. Others were barely old enough to walk, but they all said the same thing. They were staying. Ralvoth was confused. In all his years enforcing council law, he had never seen children stand up to armed authority. Usually, when faced with superior force, rational beings would surrender to protect. They're young, child, he said, his voice softer now. You do not understand. We have weapons that can destroy your entire planet. Your parents should evacuate you to safety. Yu-jin looked around at all the adults watching her, then back up at the alien ships. You don't understand, Mr. Ralvoth. Our parents taught us to stand up for what's right. They taught us that some things are more important than being safe. We choose to stay with them. In the underground chamber, Captain Yoon was learning the truth about the ancient defense network. The machines weren't weapons in the normal sense. They were barriers that could stop the Devourers from consuming everything in their path. But they only worked when powered by beings who were willing to sacrifice themselves for others. It's not about dying, he said to his team, understanding, flooding through him. It's about choosing. The Forgotten Ones understood that love is a choice, not an instinct. The holographic display shifted, showing him images of the Council's fleet above. But it also showed him something else. The approaching Devourers now, less than 4 months away from the galaxy's edge. Captain Yoon made his decision. He activated the colony's main communication system and broadcast his message not just to the alien fleet above, but to the entire galaxy. This is Captain Yoon Jae-min of New Busan Colony. I'm speaking to Enforcer Ralvoth, to the Galactic Council, and to anyone else who's listening. On hundreds of worlds across the galaxy, beings stopped what they were doing to listen to the humans' words. You ask why we follow our cubs into danger. Captain Yoon continued, standing in the ancient chamber surrounded by the glow of awakening technology. You demand we choose safety over our children, but you've never understood the choice we're really making. Above ground, Yu-jin and the other children listened to their captain's words with pride. This was what they had been trying to explain. That courage wasn't about not being scared, it was about choosing to do what was right even when you were terrified. The choice isn't between safety and danger, Captain Yoon said. It's between living as prisoners of our own fear, or living as free beings who decide for themselves what matters most. Dr. Kim So-young, listening from Earth, felt her heart racing. This was it. This was the moment when everything would change. Captain Yoon's voice grew stronger. For millions of years, you've believed that survival means putting yourself first. But the Forgotten Ones knew something you forgot. That true survival means being willing to sacrifice for something greater than yourself. The ancient machines around him pulsed with growing power as more humans throughout the galaxy heard his words and understood what he was really saying. You want to know why our cubs follow us into battle? Because we taught them that love is stronger than fear. Because we showed them that freedom is worth more than safety. And because they choose to stand with us, just as we choose to stand with them. On the Council flagship, Ralvoth felt something he had not experienced in his long life: doubt. The human's words were making sense in a way that frightened him. But it was what happened next that changed everything. Dr. Kim So-young's broadcast began reaching every world in the galaxy. The secret files about the Forgotten Ones, the evidence of the approaching Devourers, the truth about the ancient defense network, all of it streamed across galactic communication channels. The Council has been hiding the truth, Dr. Kim's voice announced. The Devourers are coming. The same force that destroyed entire galaxies in the ancient past is returning. And the only defense we have are the machines built by the Forgotten Ones, machines that only work for species like humanity. Across the galaxy, panic began to spread. But on New Busan, something else was happening. The planet itself was waking up. The ancient defense installation that had been sleeping beneath the colony for millions of years suddenly came to full power. Energy raced through tunnels that stretched across continents, lighting up systems that had waited ages for the right people to activate them. And in the main square of New Busan colony, something impossible happened. The children began to glow, not with any external light, but with something that came from inside them. It was the same energy that powered the ancient machines, the energy of choice, of love that was stronger than fear. Yujin looked down at her hands in amazement, then up at the alien ships that suddenly seemed much less frightening. Around her, other children were experiencing the same thing. They were connected to something ancient and powerful, something that recognized them as the true heirs of the Forgotten Ones. We choose, Yujin said, her voice now carrying across space itself, reaching not just the Council fleet but every world in the galaxy. We choose to stand. We choose to fight. We choose to protect everyone we love no matter what it costs us. The other children took up the cry. We choose, we choose, we choose. On his flagship, Ralvoth stared at the readings his instruments were showing him. The entire planet below was generating energy levels that should have been impossible. And at the center of it all were the human children. Their choice to stand with their parents somehow powering technology that had been dead for millions of years. For the first time in his long life, the Council enforcer realized that everything he believed about survival and strength might be completely wrong. The countdown to the Council's ultimatum no longer mattered. What mattered now was whether the galaxy could learn what humanity had always known, that sometimes the most powerful choice you can make is to choose love over fear. The children had decided. Now it was time for everyone else to choose too. Supreme Chancellor Velthak the Eternal arrived at New Busan 3 hours after the planet began to glow. His personal ship, larger than any other vessel in the Council fleet, cast a shadow that covered half the colony. For the first time in 1,000 years, the ancient ruler had left his throne to see something with his own eyes. He stood on the observation deck of his ship, looking down at the impossible sight below. The entire planet pulsed with soft blue light, and energy readings showed power levels that matched the output of entire star systems. At the center of it all, human children played in the streets while their parents worked to understand technology that was older than most civilizations. How is this possible? He asked Ralvoth, who stood beside him looking shaken and confused. I don't know, Supreme Chancellor. The moment the human children made their choice to stay, the planet's ancient systems activated. Our scientists say it's some kind of quantum resonance. The machines are responding to their willingness to sacrifice for others. Velthak had ruled the galaxy for so long that few things surprised him anymore. But this was different. This challenged everything he thought he knew about power, about survival, about the natural order of the universe. Down in the ancient chamber, Captain Yoon was learning things that made his head spin. The holographic displays now showed him the entire galaxy, with dozens of points of light scattered across it. Other Forgotten One installations that were starting to wake up. It's not just New Busan, geologist Park Yun-hai said, studying the data. Everywhere humans have colonies, the old defense systems are activating. Engineer Han Mi-kyung looked up from her scanner. The network is trying to connect. If we can link all these installations together, we might actually be able to stop the Devourers. But Captain Yoon was watching something else on the display. The approaching dark ships at the galaxy's edge. They were moving faster now, as if they sensed the awakening of their ancient enemies. "How much time do we have?" he asked. Park Yun-hai calculated quickly. 3 months, maybe less. The first Devourer scouts will reach the outer rim systems, before we can fully power the defense network. On Earth, President Lee Min-ho was dealing with the biggest crisis in human history. The revelation about the Devourers had sent panic across the galaxy. Some alien governments were demanding that humans activate every defense installation immediately. Others were calling for humanity to be destroyed before they could make things worse. But the most important call came from Supreme Chancellor Velthak himself. President Lee. The ancient alien's voice was tired, old in a way that went beyond ears. "I need to understand what is happening. Your species has activated technology that we thought was just a myth." "How?" Dr. Kim So-young, who was sitting beside President Lee, answered for him. "Because we're like them, Chancellor, like the Forgotten Ones. We put our children's welfare above our own survival." "But that's irrational," Velthak protested. "Individual survival ensures species continuation." "Does it?" Dr. Kim asked. "Your species has survived for millions of years, but what have you built? What have you created? You've spent so long focused on not dying that you've forgotten how to truly live." There was a long silence on the communication channel. Finally, Velthak spoke again. "The Devourers, they're really coming?" "Yes," President Lee said. "And according to the ancient records, the only way to stop them is to power the defense network with beings who are willing to die for others. The Forgotten Ones built the system, but they're gone. We're the only ones left who can make it work." "What do you need?" Velthak asked, and those 4 words changed the course of galactic history. Over the next month, everything humanity had built over centuries of space exploration was put to the test. Human families on dozens of worlds worked alongside alien engineers to understand and activate the ancient Forgotten One installations. On New Busan, 16-year-old Nam Yu-jin had become something she never expected, a teacher. The ancient technology responded to her and other human children in ways the adults couldn't understand. So she found herself explaining quantum mechanics to beings who had been studying science for longer than humans had existed. "It's not complicated," she told a group of alien scientists who looked confused. "The machines work on choice, not power. You have to want to protect others more than you want to protect yourself." One of the scientists, a tall being covered in silver fur, shook his head. "But that goes against every survival instinct. How do you override millions of years of evolution?" Yu-jin smiled. "You don't override it. You choose something bigger than survival. You choose love." The alien looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language, which in a way she was. But slowly, some aliens began to understand. On a few worlds, non-human parents who had learned to love their adopted human children found they could help power the defense systems too. The ancient machines didn't care what species you were, they only cared about your willingness to sacrifice for others. Colonel Bae Dong-hyun arrived on New Busan with a fleet of Earth defense ships and 1,000 Dwar volunteers. All of them had come to help power the planet's defense installation, knowing it would probably kill them. But when they reached the ancient chamber, they found something unexpected. The children were there, led by Yu-jin, and they had something to say. "You don't get to decide for us," Yu-jin told the adult volunteers. "We understand what this means, we've always understood. This is our galaxy too, and we decide to defend it." Colonel Bae looked at the young faces around him, teenagers who should have been worrying about school and friends, not the fate of the galaxy. "You're just children, this isn't your responsibility." "Yes, it is," Yu-jin replied firmly. "Our parents taught us that when something needs protecting, you protect it. The galaxy needs protecting, so we protect it. It's that simple." Adults tried to argue. But the children had made their choice. They linked hands around the ancient control pillar, their combined willpower flowing into the quantum systems that would determine whether the galaxy lived or died. Dr. Kim So-young, watching from the surface through video feeds, finally understood what the title of their story really meant. "They decide," she whispered to Captain Yoon, who was coordinating the defense network from the chamber. "Not the adults, not the council, not fear or logic or survival instinct. They decide. The children decide to stand with us, just like we decide to stand with them." The moment of truth came 3 weeks later. The Devourer scouts reached the galaxy's edge and immediately began consuming the outer star systems. Entire worlds disappeared in minutes, their light snuffed out by the dark ships that seemed to eat reality itself. But when the first Devourer ship encountered a system protected by an active Forgotten One installation, something different happened. The dark ship hit an invisible barrier and stopped. Its hull, which had seemed to absorb everything around it, suddenly blazed with light as the defense network pushed back against it. For the first time in millions of years, a Devourer ship was forced to retreat. The ancient network came fully online just as the main Devourer fleet arrived. Dozens of installations across the galaxy, powered by humans who had chosen love over fear, created a barrier that the dark ships could not cross. On New Busan, Yujin and her friends felt the moment. When the barrier activated, it was like a warm light spreading through their bodies, connecting them to every other human in the galaxy who had made the same choice they had made. Supreme Chancellor Velthak stood on his flagship, watching the impossible sight of the Devourers, being held back by technology his people had thought was just legend. Around him, his advisors struggled to understand what they were seeing. "How are the humans powering something this massive?" one of them asked. "Choice," Velthak said quietly. "They're powering it with choice." He opened a communication channel to New Busan, where Captain Yoon was coordinating the defense network. "Captain Yoon," the ancient ruler said, "the Council formally requests humanity's aid in defending the galaxy. The quarantine order is lifted. You are granted not just membership in galactic civilization, but leadership in our defense against the Devourers." Captain Yoon looked around at the children who had made this moment possible, then back at the communication screen. "We accept," he said simply. "But we do this as partners, not as rulers. The galaxy belongs to everyone who chooses to protect it." The barrier held. The Devourers, faced with the one force in the universe they could not consume, love freely, given, turned away from the galaxy and disappeared back into the dark between the stars. In the months that followed, everything changed. The Council restructured itself to include not just the ancient species who had ruled for millennia, but also the younger races who had learned what the Forgotten Ones had known all along. That true strength comes from choosing others over yourself. Human children became teachers, helping other species understand that survival wasn't about avoiding death, but about living for something worth dying for. And on New Busan, Nam Yujin stood with her friends in the colony's main square, looking up at stars that were safe because she and millions of others like her had made a simple choice. They had decided to stand. They had decided to fight. They had decided to love. And that decision had saved the galaxy.